Where does creativity fit into compliance? In more places than you think. Problem solving, accountability, communication, and connection, they all take creativity. Join your hosts, Tom Fox and Ronnie Feldman, on Creativity and Compliance, part of the Compliance Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to a special 5-part podcast series that Ronnie Feldman and I have put together for Compliance Week 2019. In this podcast series, we present some different things that you can do during Compliance Week to jumpstart your compliance communications program. So in episode 1, we debate whether Compliance Week is BS, Ronnie's position, or my position that no, it's important and significant. We also talk about the concept of a petting zoo for compliance. In episode 2, we talk about the use of talk shows as a way to communicate. In episode 3, we consider contests and games you can put on. In episode 4, we give a potpourri of other ideas which would work for you during Compliance Week. And in episode 5, we wrap up around education and influence and how to use Compliance Week really as a starting point for a great communication strategy throughout the year. I know you will find this useful, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Ronnie and I had a lot of fun putting it together for you. Thanks again for listening. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox and Ronnie Feldman back for a special 5-part series on creativity and compliance. Ronnie, in this episode, we're going to introduce the topic of Compliance Week and one topic or one thing that we both think a compliance practitioner can do. I know you have some thoughts on, I think, what you call the BS of Compliance Week. So why don't we get started there?
Wow, way to jump right in with the lead there. So I run a creative agency where so often we get asked to help with Compliance Weeks. But one thing that occurred to me is that the whole concept of having a Compliance Week is kind of ridiculous when you think about it, because most companies spend a lot of time on their training and education, and many companies want to keep that serious. And what happens is it ends up being a bit boring, but somehow they're allowed to do 1 week where they get to be creative and interesting and try and bring people in. I just want to point out the fact that if we think that that's a good idea 1 week out of the year, that's an idea that we should be doing all year round. The goals of these Compliance Weeks tend to be to promote the program, to show how welcoming and approachable you are, to get people to understand that these aren't abstract policies, that these are day-to-day activities that you have to think about, and that you are there to help them. So I like to say that it's a bit BS just because it's, for some reason, it's like I feel like companies might throw you a bone and give you a week to promote yourself. I just want to point out that that's something that we should be doing all year round.
There's a reason there are lawyers and civilians. And so I'm going to give the lawyer response to that.
Okay.
The lawyer response to that says that it's absolutely appropriate to do this sort of celebration 1 week a year.
Yeah.
And the reason it's appropriate from the legal perspective is, number one, it demonstrates a commitment. 2, you've documented a commitment if the regulators ever come knocking and they want to say, what did you do when you weren't doing your daily, to show your commitment and emphasize this. And 3, if you use Compliance Week properly and in using some of the tools, tactics, and strategies we're going to suggest throughout this podcast series, if you use that simply as a jumping off point to convey your message throughout the year, that it can be a not only celebration of compliance, but a re-emphasis of compliance, and get people to really think about it and use that to have them continue to think about it in across the year. So my experience as a lawyer in a corporation tells me that it's not BS, and that it is actually something that can be a powerful tool. But what we both believe is that there's lots of things you can do. So, yeah, I'm sorry, I cut you off, Ronnie.
No, well, it's okay. So I wanted to yes and you. So valid points. I dig it. I agree with everything you said. I guess I just want to point out the fact that if you're not interesting and approachable all year round, that 1 week is not going to overcome the sort of the negativity that you've created, or the scariness or the inapproachability that you've created the other 51 weeks of the year. So yes, to everything you said, I want to use this as an opportunity to say, if you think it's important to celebrate and the importance of ethics and compliance in your organization for 1 week, yes, use that as a stepping stone to do that more frequently, or to change the tone of how you communicate throughout the year, so that you can kind of create that vibe more often.
Well, you've now seen our Siskel and Ebert segment of Point Counterpoint. Now on to Ronnie. What's one thing that a compliance professional or chief compliance officer could do during Compliance Week to help get the message out that you wanted to emphasize today?
Sure. Well, I thought we'd start with a simple idea that many companies do. I like to call it the ethics and compliance petting zoo. And this is just the idea of setting up that table in the lunchroom, or showing up at other meetings on a more regular basis to promote your program. So it's the tabletop. I call it the petting zoo because really what you're there is to show off your program and resources. But the way I would, I guess, suggest for a way to do it a little bit more creatively is literally to put a theme around it. Like, Tom, you and I were joking. I think I called it a kissing booth, and you're like, we can't call it a kissing booth. But the point being is, ask a question about us. Ask a question about a policy. Do 2 truths and a lie about conflicts of interest, or 2 truths and a lie about the hotline. Create a little fun format, but the point being to show up where people are, encourage them to come get to know you, and get to know what you're about. Because one of the things we've talked about before is ethics and compliance can be toxic words, and they are scary to people. So this is your opportunity to get out into the masses, put a face to the name, and let them know who you are and that you are there to help them.
So, Ronnie, is that something that compliance officers could do? Literally, I really like your thoughts around getting out where the people are. I try to emphasize that the customer of a compliance program are internal employees. And is that part of a message around creativity, is to go where the people are and communicate to them in a mechanism that they were willing to listen to?
In general, the idea is to show up where people are, whether that's physically in person or through media that you can create, to promote the helplines, to promote the ethics office. You can do that through videos, through GIFs, through memes. But to this point, I was just talking to a client the other day, and they say that there's 2 or 3 big town halls and leadership meetings throughout the company each year, and they set up a table at those meetings, so that in between breaks of the general sessions and all the stuff that's going on, people can come over and take flyers and talk to them. So yeah, doing it in Ethics Compliance Week, you show up where people are. If that's a product training, if that's a sales training, if that's a leadership training, if that's the lunchroom, it's like you want to increase your visibility, and to do that as friendly as way as possible, so that you can start rebranding yourself as that helpful, welcoming, approachable resource that you are.
So, Ronnie, unfortunately, we're near the end of our time for this episode, but I hope our listeners will join us for our next episode, where we're going to have yet another idea that you can utilize during your Compliance Week. Ronnie, you want to tell everybody goodbye?
Yeah, bye everybody. Have fun. Show up where they are, and set up your petting zoo.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Creativity and Compliance. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to subscribe and leave a review.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.